Hi, everyone. Colleen Neal from Let's Talk About It. Today's episode, I want to talk about navigating disability. Woo! So, yeah, I went through the battle with disability and it was a nightmare. So I want to talk to you about my experience. Again, I talk to you from a patient's point of view. I talk to you from my own experience. And number one, let's talk about if you're going to look at disability, let's talk about what kind of disability do you have. So number one, you have to figure out what kind of disability do you have. Do you have private disability or are you a public worker, right? Are you going through state disability or going through private disability or so for me, I'm going to speak from my own experience. I work for a private company. I will not name any names, my company, who I work for, anything. But I had a private disability, meaning my company paid into a private disability benefit program that I had to go through. So first you have to figure that out. So for me, I'm private. So I'm speaking through private disability. A lot of you, if you're, let's say you're a public worker, maybe, you're a teacher or a fireman or a police officer or something like that. Maybe, you have a public plan and maybe you buy supplemental. So you really want to look at that. So if you're in a union, I'm going to tell you right now, talk to a union rep. If you are in a corporation or something like that, you want to talk to your human resources people, right? So talk to your people about it, the people that are in the know. So first of all, figure that out. So for me, I had a private plan, so I'm going to speak from that avenue. All right. The second thing is, are we talking about short-term disability or long-term disability? So the first thing I dealt with was obviously short-term disability. So for me, that was the first 6 months after I was in a car accident. And from my car accident, I had very bad concussion. I had post-concussion syndrome, ended up having vestibular migraine, and I ended up having occipital neuralgia. I deal with both of those things still. I'm over a year out from that accident. So the first 6 months, I dealt with short-term disability, relatively easy to deal with. I just needed to submit physician statements that said what my diagnosis was, what kind of treatment I was getting, what my limitations were. And I basically had to have that like every month or every 6 months submitted, no problem. I got 2/3 of my pay, boop, no problem. Then after those 6 months were up, it changed over to long-term disability. And that is when the trouble began. There were way bigger hoops to go through, way bigger process. The review was way more strenuous and definitely bigger standards to hit. Excuse me. So I'm going to tell you a couple things that I recommend. One, keep every single thing. Every single time you go to a physician, you keep every report. You ask them if you can fill out a medical release form so that you can have printout copies or have them mail you hard copies or email digital copies of everything. And by that, I mean your doctor's notes, operative reports, anything for post-treatment. So if you have any kind of epidurals, nerve blocks, MRIs, blood work, anything, you make sure you get copies of everything, or you have access to it, have them send it to you. You want all of it, because whether you're going to deal with it on the legal side or you're going to deal with it in disability, you're going to need copies of everything. Okay, so keep track of everything. So number one, have access to all of your medical records. Number two, I recommend getting a calendar, like a real book calendar from Jump Street, whenever your symptoms begin. For me, it was from when my accident began. You keep track of every single treatment that you have, you write it down, every single appointment you have with everybody, every doctor, every therapist, every acupuncture treatment, chiropractor, you name it. Anything that has to do with you and your healthcare, blood work, everything, you write it down in that book so you have it. That becomes a living document. Again, whether you need it legally or with the disability, it's in there. The third thing I'm going to recommend is on that same calendar, or a different calendar, but I recommend in the same calendar because it's easier. You write down every symptom you have. Doesn't have to be every day. You can even do it weekly. You have a bad day, you write it down. You cry, you write it down. You get a scale of 1 to 10 where you can indicate your pain level, write it down. You would do day, night, or even morning, afternoon, night, and you just put the numbers there. So you have a record of it. It's good to see over time, just for your own knowledge. It's good so you can report to a physician, so you can kind of see over time. You can bring that book and say, well, this is what the last few weeks have looked like, in between your doctor's appointments. And then it's also really good, so when it comes to disability, you can have that information when it comes to disability. So I recommend all of that. So you have that information on your person, in your possession at all times. It's always a good thing to have. And put your symptoms on there as well. So not just the 1 through 10 pain, but your symptoms: dizziness, major imbalance. I had, an episode. I had severe pain. Whatever those symptoms are, indicate those, in that calendar. I think it's super important, right? Because then you'll see when things start, when things end, when things get worse. Important. Okay, so let's get back to the disability piece. 6 months hits. And now, all of a sudden, the physician statements aren't enough. Now they want all these other records. First of all, where are they sending these requests? Because what happened is this company, which shall remain nameless, which was awful and incompetent, in my opinion, they said they requested these records. I told them who my doctors were. And then they weren't. So, by the way, I'm not getting paid now. All of a sudden, the payments stopped because they had to review my case. Somehow they had to review my case again. And I would call. They said, we didn't get your records from your doctor. That's weird. So after a while, like 5 weeks, 6 weeks, we don't have your records. We don't have your records. We don't have your records. I called my doctor's offices. I said, did you get a request from so-and-so? And they said, no. All my doctors said that. So I said, please tell me what number the disability company needs to call to request records. So I called 5 different doctor's offices to get that number, 5. And then I called back the disability people and I said, where did you send your request? They said whatever. And I said, wrong place. Here's the number. So I had to give them the numbers for every one of my doctors. So for 5 weeks, they wasted everyone's time, especially mine, and I didn't get paid because they just send it out into the ether and never got my records. Okay. So then I waited a few days and called every one of my 5 physicians back and asked, did you get a request for my records? Some of them said yes. A few of them said no. So I had to call back the disability places and say, hey, did you request? Yes, I did. I said, no, you didn't, because I called. And where did you call? Again, I had to give them the number. So while I'm not feeling well, sick, pain, all the stuff, I had to be the person to call my physicians and be the mediator between the disability people and them to make sure the disability people were getting the records. So that's number 1. So weeks went by and they kept saying, we can't make a decision because we don't have your records. Meanwhile, no pay. Now I'm going on 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever it was. Finally, they get the records. And now they need a lot of time to make their decision. Okay, so now here's the important part. Vestibular migraine, they hear the word migraine. Well, I will tell you this. Well, bottom line, they denied me. They denied me. And I'll explain how I dealt with that in a little bit. One of the reasons they deny me is they said they got letters from my physicians that said that my physician said I was okay to work. I said, that is impossible. That's impossible, because all my doctors wrote you letters that said I needed to be out of work. You have those letters. They said, nope, well, we sent them letters and they signed it. And I said, I want those letters. So I'm going to tell you something. Watch out for letters that the disability company might send to your doctors. This is what they did. I said, I want the letters. So I asked for the letters and I got them. I read them. Each letter was 4 to 6 pages in length. And in those letters, somewhere in there, there were 2 sentences embedded in those letters that said in there, if you sign this paper, you agree that Colleen Neal was able to work as of March 2023. And then there was all this other mumbo jumbo. And my doctors likely scanned it, blah, 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 and they signed it. So they didn't know what they signed. So I called my doctor's offices and I'd explained to them, hey, do you know, not the doctors, their secretaries, do you know that embedded on page 3, oh my gosh, we didn't know, blah, 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 blah. So my doctors now, their office had to recant what they signed and then wrote a new letter of medical necessity. I had to go back to disability and say, what you wrote, A, was misleading at best misleading. What I would say is, well, other things. It's misleading. So now we had to deal with that. And now I'm in the appeal process. The other thing I had to do is now I'm just going to say in my job, I'm an advocate for other people. So it's kind of like what I do for a living. So I was able to kind of turn that part on. And I asked them for a lot of things and made it very uncomfortable for them. But one of the things I asked for was I wanted the resume of the people that were evaluating and made the decision to deny my disability. And I was told that it was a neuropsychologist. I have a traumatic brain injury. I have vestibular migraine, occipital neuralgia from a car accident where I had a brain injury. And they have someone who's an expert at anxiety, depression, and mood disorders, determining whether or not I can go back to work. Meanwhile, they don't even know really what it is that I do for a living. So let's talk about how to deal with an appeal like that. Number one, the people that are determining whether you are disabled or not need to know what it is that you do for a living. In my denial, it read that my job was something like that of a, what did they say? A consumer representative. That's not what I do. And then it said something like they likened to what I do that I could go on something like light duty. Okay, that's not what I do. So what I do is I give people advice and I represent them in the labor space. So what I need is mental endurance, mental acuity. I need to make high-level decisions very quickly, negotiate contracts, and represent people in arbitrations. So that is what the people that deal with my disability need to understand, is what I do. I teach upwards of 15 to 100, 150 people at a time. I drive anywhere from 15 miles to 50 miles a day or more. I can be in meetings for 2 hours to 8 hours at a time. I work in public school buildings. I'm in fluorescent lights. I'm in loud places. I teach, I use microphones, and I'm in speaker systems. I'm in loud buildings. They needed to understand what I deal with. I deal with very, very high pressure situations, fast decisions making, and I deal with, like I said, quick judgment, high level decision making. So it is not what they thought it was. The second thing is what I'm dealing with has nothing to do with anxiety or mood disorders. It's anatomical damage to my brain. So I challenge them. The person who's reviewing my case should be someone who understands the anatomy of the brain. It was very clear to me that when they heard the word migraine, they thought all I had was headaches. They did not understand my diagnosis. So when you are dealing with disability, one, you need to thoroughly explain every aspect of your job. Can you and have you listed with specific detail what it is you do for a living? Specifically, how many hours a day are you on the computer? What kind of things are you doing on the computer? What is the expectation of you dealing with other people? What kind of decision making are you doing? What is the mental acuity expectation? What kind of language expectation do you have? How often are you around lights? What kind of lights, right? All of those things, you need to be able to spell it out very, very specifically when you are dealing with disability. The second thing, more importantly, is what are your limitations? So what I had to spell out very clearly, well, let me go back. The first thing I had to do was explain my diagnosis and what the diagnosis meant. So I said, I have vestibular migraine. Then I listed 11 symptoms of vestibular migraine, right? So you can look at my other videos. I did the big 9, right? The phonophobia, I did all the eye problems, nystagmus, what that meant. Sound, sound issues and what that meant. Light issues, what that meant. Balance issues, and specifically what the balance issues meant. I went through the whole thing, right? And then I did occipital neuralgia, and I talked about all of that and what that meant. Very specifically, the diagnostic criteria for those things. Then I went through the specifics of my job title, and then specific daily activities of what my job might entail. The third thing was my limitations. And I think this is the most important thing. And either you have to write it or your doctor has to write it. I cannot work around fluorescent lights. I cannot work around speaker systems. I can only be around 2 or 3 people at a time for about 1 hour. My mental acuity and endurance is good for about an hour. I cannot read. I deal with contracts and contract language. I cannot do anything up close. I cannot read. My short-term memory has been affected. I cannot negotiate a contract verbally. I cannot count on my short-term memory. Everything has to be written down. And on top of it, I have trouble reading things that are written down. So I'm incapable of doing that. I cannot work in an arbitration and do a witness testimony and write notes and come up with questions. I can't do that. My processing time has been greatly affected. There's no possible way that I can do a hearing. There's absolutely no way. So I have to explain that, right? I have to explain that. These are my limitations. I cannot drive for more than a half hour. I cannot drive in unfamiliar places. I cannot, I cannot teach 100 people. I can't do it. So I have to explain those things. In addition to that, and I would recommend this, I had 3 different people write narratives of what they observed in me at different functions. So I had my sister write an observation of when I attended my nephew's graduation, and I had a vestibular migraine episode where I lost my inability to speak properly, and I lost my inability to walk, and I had to leave the party. I had my daughter-in-law write a narrative about my having some dysfunction as well, so that they had some sense from another person what they saw in a change of me physically. They saw mental and physical behavioral changes in me. So I included that as well. So I think it's really important that you give as much information as possible. They will review your medical records. But I think it's important that you also explain your daily life as well and be really, really honest about it. So I think those are the things that you really need to go over. So yeah, so be specific. Tell your doctor to be specific. Some doctors are really good dealing with the disability stuff, but some of them aren't, and you have to tell them hey, listen, I need you to be really specific when you write out why I'm out. Can you be really specific? Don't just say I have imbalance. Can you say I can't walk in a straight line, and, I can't look up, you know, or I can't do anything close to my face. I can't look at a computer for more than 1 hour at a time, or I need breaks every 15 minutes looking at a computer. Ask your doctor to be really, really specific, so that, your work and the disability people can see how limited you are. I think it's really specific. It's really important. So again, be really specific about what your job entails, what you cannot do. I hope that, your disability people review it and they understand it, and that you do get the go ahead. I know it's really frustrating if you don't. Do the appeal process, be specific, have someone else put their eyes on what you're doing, enlist help either from coworkers. Certainly, if you're in a union, have union representation help you. Do not do it on your own. HR, have them help you, or other people who have been through it. Some of you might even need to get attorneys involved, which is ridiculous, but you might need to do that. Like, don't mess around, because you might need help. And this is the difference between you being able to like get through this. This is not an easy fix. Some of us are going to deal with this for the rest of our lives. We hope that treatment helps us. We hope that we're going to get better. It could take years for us to get better. I hope to God that I can go back to work. I'm having occipital nerve decompression surgery February 4th of this year. I know it's going to take about 9 months to a year for me to know if I'm going to have what it takes for me to go back to work and function at the level that'll allow me to do the things I was just telling you that I could do at work. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to function at that level again. On top of the occipital neuralgia, I have vestibular migraine. I can't walk in a straight line. I can't like look up at a ceiling. I can't look to the left and turn my head, or look to the right and talk to people for a length of time. Can't be all those things I just told you I can't do. I can't teach 100 people. I can't negotiate a contract right now. There's no way. So I pray to God that I'm able to do that once all these treatments are done, and my year of Botox treatments and the medication and all of that. But if I'm not able to go back, I'm on long-term disability now after a fight and an appeal, and it took 5 months, by the way, with no pay, 5 months for me to finally win that appeal. And now I'm on long-term disability. I might be on long-term disability for the rest of my life. I don't know. But it's something you have to really take your time with, really do your research on it, and enlist as much help as possible. So I wish you luck. I hope this was helpful. There's other help online, especially if you are in the public sector, for sure. So good luck with it. And I wish you the best. And really, I just hope for all of us that the treatment helps and we get better and we don't have to deal with disability at all. So good luck to you all.